Jackie. Thank you. So I guess first we've got to find out who we've got in the room. Anybody here from my home county, Jasper County? Anybody? Where are you? Thank you. Born and raised and commonly referred to as Rensselaer-Tucky. Am I right? Okay. See, I'm a Feldhaus. You know, the Feldhaus Farms. Come on now. You probably know an uncle or a cousin or somebody. All right. Anybody from the county where I grew up, my dad said, you know what? Rensselaer's nice, but I want to move to Gary. And we moved to Lake County. Anybody from Lake County, Indiana? Raise your hand. Gary is beautiful. Nobody? All right. How about LaPorte County? That's where I graduated from high school. Anybody from Michigan City or LaPorte? All right, I'll stop. Cheryl, you take them.
Scott County, Indiana. Clark County, we already mentioned. Jefferson County, Madison. Anyone? Jackson. Okay, tell us what counties you're from. What are the counties in the room? Elkhart, Shelby.
Vermilion. Somebody better be from Switzerland. You're right here.
Switzerland counties represented. Ohio.
Monroe, and we're really glad that Purdue beat Ohio.
I won't talk about the open bucket yet, but I got a feeling you're in trouble, Hoosiers. Okay. All right, how about this side? Some of you in the back, where are you from? Boone, and what else? Oh, Davies, okay. Kosciuszko, spell it. Who can spell Kosciuszko County? I know you're from there. You don't have to spell it. I couldn't spell that in a million years. All right, now we'll get to the obstinate people who weren't moving for nothing. Could you move? They said, no, we're not doing it. We're sitting right here. Where are you from? Allen County, Fort Wayne, Indiana. Nothing wrong with that. How about it? All of you? It's like Vigo, Vandenberg, Evansville, and Dearborn. All right, so the south, the deep south to the northeast. That's good. Well, here's the deal. We're going to talk conflict for a little bit. As Jackie said, I was an assistant, I was a high school teacher at Bedford, North Lawrence. Any Lawrence County people? Stars. When Damon was there, baby. Ran Star Station 31, the television station. You remember those old black and white? Remember you could get it on TV at the time. I was a proud runner, a proud star. So I taught for 10 years at Bedford North Lawrence High School. Then I went to the dark side. This story matters, so listen carefully. I went to the dark side, and I became an administrator. And I was an assistant principal at Jeffersonville High School. And I know what you did. I saw what was in your car. I know when you skipped school. I knew when you brought that bad stuff in. I watched you when you, and the list goes on. And guess what that means? I was living with conflict for a long, long time. I had a lot of kids didn't like me very much when I was assistant principal, including Mr. Snelling's boy once. Not many times, but a couple. He's a Clark County kid. I know his boy. And, you know, when you're an assistant principal, conflict just kind of happens. So I started thinking a lot about conflict and how we could avoid it, how we could deal with it. And I've kind of carried that research on. I then became a principal and a central office administrator in Greater Clark and New Albany. Anybody from Floyd County? Any Floyd counties? I'm just curious. New Albany, Floyd County. And I've carried that research on. So today, what we're going to talk about a little bit is the concept of conflict coaching. Now, I'm told that the vast majority of you serve in leadership roles in your organizations. That doesn't mean that you have to be a leader to somehow be a conflict coach. Peer-to-peer conflict coaching is a really good idea as well. But first, let me ask you, and really this could be a really short session if we don't get many hands, is there any conflict in your workplace? Would you raise your hand if there is? See, if only one or two of you did, then we're adjourned. We go home. But about 80% of you said there's conflict in the workplace, right? And what we're going to do is talk a little bit about how you deal with that conflict, what that conflict is, and how you might be able to incorporate the concept of conflict coaching with your customers, with your colleagues. It works in personal life too. That's why Cheryl's here, right? We're going to talk a little bit about the personal side. How many of you have any conflict in your personal lives? Maybe you got a 15-year-old? Anybody got a teenager? Yeah, trust me, you got if you got a teenager, you've got conflict. I've raised two. One of them, best kid you ever saw. The other one, he's either going to be a thoracic surgeon or a convicted felon. He could fall right off I don't know which, he's on the tightrope all the time, and I never know where he's going. So conflict just is, right? We're going to help you understand the concepts of conflict coaching. We're going to help you apply those basic skills of what conflict coaching is, and you're going to gain some insights for dealing with conflict, both personally and professionally. Cheryl?
I'm not used to using a microphone. I'm used to doing smaller groups, and if I do this, somebody, Marilyn, will you help me out? Will you just point and let me know? What we would like to do now is for each of you, just individually, to turn a sheet of paper over, and I'd like to encourage you to list up to 10 things in your life that create stress or conflict for you. You're not going to have to share these with the whole group or anything, so they can be private. But take just a few minutes and make your list. And hold on to that list today, because we're going to come back to it later. But after you do that, I'm going to ask a few people if you'll just share topics. What are some of those basic topics? And remember, this can include professional or personal. It may include how you dealt with the clerk at Kroger this morning, because sometimes people are having a bad day, and you never know how you're going to interact with them, right? Maybe us, maybe them.
And remember, up to 10. If you have 47, Cheryl is a licensed therapist.
And I do have cards available.
She's got a card for you. Just up to 10. 3 or 4. If you only have 2 or 3, that's cool too.
And whenever anyone feels like you're finished with your list, just let's see hands, so we'll kind of see where the group is going. Now, you need something on your list because you are going to use it later. So, and that leads me to this question. I work with a lot of people who sometimes, when we're talking about stress or conflict, they say, I don't have any stress. I don't have any conflict in my life. Do you believe them? I don't think so. That would be called denial. This lady says she's lived in that land. I've lived there too. But eventually, it raises up and it bites you, right? I do. Let me see a show of hands. How many people feel like you have no stress or no conflict in your life? None whatsoever. Who else lives in the river of denial? Some people have made their list very quickly. Others look tortured, even thinking about the conflict in your lives. We're here to help you deal with some of that torture. So you have some. You'll go away today with. We'll be looking at some concepts and also some skills. We have a couple of exercises that you'll be able to take skills with you that will apply anywhere you are. We'll better understand conflict, so sometimes we can remove ourselves from it when we understand what's actually going on. Show of hands, how many are finished with your list? How many might want a couple more minutes? One needs a little bit more time.
Okay, we'll give you another second or two, but while we do that, let's define conflict. Now, there's a book learning definition, and then there's a personal definition, and then there's a, in my experience, this is conflict, right? So look, this is the book definition. This is kind of the theoretical piece. Conflict defined often, not always, but this is kind of the theoretical definition, is about incompatible goals or thoughts or emotions within or between individuals or groups that leads to opposition or antagonistic interaction. So it could be personal, could be within groups, but it is usually about when one person feels that another person or group is interfering with his or her ability to obtain their objective. So think about that. Think about the customer that comes into the county for service. Think about the taxpayer. Think about it from a personal level. Remember those teenagers, maybe a spouse, maybe an aunt, maybe an uncle, maybe a mom, maybe a dad. Think about this definition of conflict, and you have the handout as well. And then I want to talk to you just a little bit about how we manage conflict. It doesn't always come down this way, but it often does, right? So what we would call the traditional view of conflict is that, you know what? Conflict is a result of poor managers. We just had good leaders out there. We just had high-quality managers. We would do better. So we've got to get better leadership. And look, if you ever watch The Apprentice, you're fired. Remember that term? You're fired. That's often the traditional view, right? You're not getting the job done. You didn't do it. You didn't produce. You didn't perform. So therefore, you're fired. We're going to try somebody else. Or, in your case, maybe you're voted out, right? It happens. That's the traditional view of how we handle conflict. Now, the human relations view looks at it a little differently. And I would suggest to you that we use all three of these. There are just three that I'm going to share with you. The human relations view looks at it a little differently. They say, you know, conflict is not good. It is not bad. It just is. It is a natural phenomenon, just like many natural phenomena, and it's part of human existence, and we ought to accept it as a normal part of group interaction and relationships. You're going to get into tiffs. You're going to have problems. You're going to have issues, and it is. So the question now is how we deal with it, which we're going to talk about a little bit. And the third way that we often manage conflict is what's called the integrationist view. And an integrationist, and remember, we sometimes use all three, conflict is a positive force for change. Everybody should have conflict. Every organization ought to embrace conflict because that's how you get better, right? We have, and I'm going to make political jokes, so hang in there. Obama, Trump, doesn't matter. We have a president in the White House who embraces the integrationist view. Chaos is good. I want you to fight it out at your level. Bring it to me, and then I'll make a call. Because the best decision will come as a result of your conflict, right? We've had other presidents or other leaders in other companies who have adopted possibly the human relations view that it is what it is. Now let's all try to solve this conflict and play nice in the sandbox so we can move forward. So oftentimes the human relations view is we can't move forward until we resolve the conflict. The integrationist says, conflict is good. I'm going to make the call because I'm the leader, and I want certain members of my team to really kind of duke it out and make sure they bring me 2 or 3 of the very best options instead of 24 or 25 of the best options, right? So, figure out those three, and we often use all of them. It's not either or. It's not one or the other. Often leaders use all three. I want to talk to you about positive and negative conflict because there is a difference. How many of you are athletes? Raise your hand if you're a runner, a golfer, a bowler, whatever. Okay. I've got an athlete in the back, and it's the young lady in the white that I'm going to call on. What's your sport? You're a runner. Okay. How many runners in it? Joggers, runners, get out. You run competitively? Anybody run competitively? You've run an Ironman. We did Ironman in Louisville last week. You've done 10Ks. And that doesn't have to be competitive. We'll stay with you. So you run. Before you run, do you feel a little something in the pit of your stomach like it's going to hurt a little bit? I injured my toe. I've got to stretch. I know I have to do all this stuff, and then you start running. How do you, what's your, in what ways do you prepare to run? You will.
I look at past photos of me when I was overweight. That always helps. I do stretch. I give myself a nice coaching on the positives that are going to happen because I do this.
Gotcha. So, sorry about that. I had my finger on the button. I advanced my screen. So, we're back to positive conflict. So, there is a little bit of stress, a little bit of something inside you that kind of, you prepare and get ready to run, right, for your athletic competition, if you will. How many of you ever been a public speaker? Any of you have to speak publicly? What happens before you go on stage sometimes, or you speak like we're doing here?
Sometimes you can get a bit nervous, your throat will tighten up a little bit.
It does. You're looking for water, you get dry mouth a little bit, your body, you start sweating a little bit. So whether you're a professional athlete or you're a public speaker or whatever your concept is in terms of conflict, that stress is good stress, okay? It's called eustress. Sometimes we need stress to perform optimally, right? You need a little bit of stress, a little bit of conflict within or externally to perform optimally, and that is what we often call positive conflict. It can be internal, and I use those examples, but, positive conflict says we're functional and we support benefits the organization and our main objectives. And often positive conflict, something good that happens, that integrationist view, often positive conflict really helps us clarify values, understand key issues, increase involvement by members of the organization that are marginalized or feel that they're marginalized. So there are some good things that can happen from positive conflict, right? That's a good thing. Know that, right? Conflict is not all negative. Now, when you have distress, you can't perform, okay? And there's a fine line. There's a fine line between getting thirsty, having a little cotton mouth, having some nerves, breaking out in perspiration before you speak publicly, right? And being frozen and not being able to get the words out, okay? That's negative conflict. And that happens in organizations sometimes too, right? Many things happen, but the three biggies are the whole organization and certainly the individuals within it get emotional. Now, emotion isn't a bad thing. Cheryl's going to point that out to you a little bit later. It can be a bad thing if it overcomes, and we'll talk about that a little later, but emotion just is. Like conflict, it's not good, it's not bad, it just is, right? Personality clashes often happen in negative conflict, and the biggie is decreased communication. Sometimes people just clam up and they stop and it's done. Hopefully that's not happening in your organization as we are here today, but if it is, we're going to give you some tools to take care of that. there are some sources of that interpersonal conflict that are pretty important to know and understand. And what we're giving you is just some baseline concepts of conflict so that when you begin coaching and we give you the skill set necessary a little bit later this afternoon, you're going to have a little better understanding, right? So, sources of interpersonal conflict often, not always, evolve around limited resources, right? I have this part of the organization doesn't, they have more, I get less, I'm angry, or I get concerned, or I'm covetous. I wish I had their stuff, right? And sometimes it's stuff, sometimes it's personnel. How come this office gets to post this position for help when my office needs help too? I should be posting a position. I need somebody who can help me with whatever the job is at hand, right? There are often differences in goals and objectives as well. And we can come upon intergroup conflict, which can be, not always, is differences between members of one single group, or we can come on to intergroup conflict, which is two groups within the same organization that are having issues. Those are some sources of interpersonal conflict. Some additional sources, and I've mentioned it once before here, poor communication, or even miscommunication, right? And that results from differences in the processes and principles of communication and culture. So if the court system isn't communicating, the judicial system isn't communicating with police and police officers, we have miscommunication. If the county clerk's office isn't communicating with the recorder's office, we often have miscommunication, right? Another source of interpersonal conflict are just attitudes, values, and perceptions. We cannot deny that maybe, as a country, we're a little bit divided. Part of that is due to our values, and the values that we've all embraced from childhood on up. Trust me, Jasper County is a very different place than Lake County, Indiana. I've grown up and spent time in both places. Values are sometimes a little different. Attitudes are sometimes a little different. Perceptions are a little different. And that happens, and it can lead to interpersonal conflict. And finally, we have style differences, right? Some people are just boss-subordinate different. Some bosses are micromanagers, right? They're going to look over your shoulder and tell you everything to do. I've got 3 heads shaking right here. I hope your boss isn't here, or maybe if he or she is, it'll help. So that's a good thing. Some bosses are very hands-off. Some supervisors are, look, get your job done. Here's your resources. Here's everything you need to get your job done. I expect you to perform. Right? I prefer, and I try to be that kind of a supervisor or leader as chair of the Department of Technology, Leadership, and Communication at the Purdue School of Engineering and Technology. That's what I prefer. I prefer to hire the best talent in the world and cut them loose. We have a saying in Louisville, Kentucky. Let your thoroughbreds run. What the heck are you going to get a thoroughbred for and put them in the barn? What use is that? Right? Think about that, leaders. Let your thoroughbreds run. Now that's style, right? That's leadership style and who you are. And it can be a source of interpersonal conflict. And we're going to give you 5 things that we believe the vast majority of you fall into one of these 5 areas when you manage conflict. When you manage conflict. Okay? So I want you to think just a little bit. This is going to be one of our reflections in a second. I want you to think just a little bit which of the next 5 you fall under. Okay? And it'll be interesting then to think about who you are when we talk later about what causes you stress and conflict that you just identified. So there is the avoider. Avoid conflict at all costs. Just not going to deal with it. Conflict, no conflict here. It's the people we asked earlier. How many of you have no conflict? Me. I'm just oblivious. Life is good. It's all good. Everybody loves me and I love everybody. Have any conflict? This whole workshop, how ridiculous. Why? You choose to conflict. Well, they're avoiders. Okay? They're saying, I choose just not to deal with it. Now, let me be clear. None of these 5 is worse or better than one or the other. However, you should know when they're appropriate to use. So take a read here, right? An avoiding conflict strategy is okay if the issues are trivial or of minor importance. I'll give you one. Cheryl, would you step up here? We're going to role play. And Cheryl's going to show me how to avoid. Mom, can I have the candy? Mom, I know we're in Kroger. You told me to shut up. I'm not. I need the candy. Mom, I need the candy.
I'm avoiding it. How many have ignored that kind of behavior?
You either ignore it or get the candy. That's a form of avoidance, right? Yes. Question? Okay. So there's an avoider, right? You just avoid. You just walk away. So I've been in Kroger 3 aisles over. My children are yelling. I don't know where the hell. You go on ahead and I've got shopping to do. I'm not getting the damn Pop-Tarts. It's not happening. It's bad for you, right?
And then a stranger like me goes, "Are you okay? Where are your parents?"
I know. You know, they only keep you for 2 days in jail when you abandon the children. So if it's trivial or of minor importance, you just avoid. Why would you spend time, right? Think about that. If emotions are really high, if there's been a really, I hate to do it, but I'll do husbands and wives. Your wife knows exactly which buttons.
Driving.
to press.
Use driving as an example.
I'll use driving as an example. No, here's a perfect one. Here is a perfect one. Honey, where would you like to go to eat? Oh, honey, anywhere. It's fine. I'll go anywhere. Okay, I choose Texas Roadhouse. I want a steak tonight, honey. Oh, I don't want to go there. Texas, oh, it's bad. They just have the steaks. It's bad for you.
And they have peanuts in the floor.
And peanuts, it's unsanitary. Honey, you just said that we push buttons, and is it okay to avoid and go, look, where do you want to go? It's fine. I'll go anywhere. Really, I'll sacrifice. And there's another type of avoidance that we talk about. So when emotions are high and, you're having a little bit of this anyway, it's okay to avoid. And if you feel you can't resolve the conflict, or if somebody could resolve it better than you, let them do it. Avoid it for then. Avoidance doesn't mean drop it forever. Because trust me, that restaurant thing will come back. 3 days later, where do you want to go? Anywhere but your stupid steakhouse. I got sick. The red meat is killing me. Okay? All right, honey. So, another strategy is to accommodate. Well, let's do this. How many of you think you might be an avoider? A little bit? Occasionally? A few? All right, okay.
And sometimes it's helpful to avoid.
It is.
If it doesn't matter, it's okay. But that
That's
means you've
okay.
accepted it.
That's right. So, accommodating. Let's see about the person who handles conflict through accommodation. When you're more concerned with preserving the relationship than with accomplishing the goal. And here's the deal, guys. Conflict is often about goal-relationship matrices, right? You have a vertical axis. I'll do my Purdue stuff. You have a vertical axis, a y-axis, and an x-axis. You have a horizontal axis, and it's about goals and what you want, and then it's about relationships, right? And we're going to see a little graph here in a minute. So an accommodator says, you know what? The relationship here is more important to the goal than the goal of whatever the issue may be, and they say, I'll accommodate. I'm okay.
Because I just want to please you.
Well, yes. That's the kind of... And Accommodation is suitable when the issue isn't very important to you, the accommodator, right? That's key to understand. And it's suitable if you just want to please, like Cheryl's. I just want harmony. I just want peace.
Peace and love for all mankind.
Right?
I don't care where we go to dinner.
Harmony is greater than winning on the issue. So, how many accommodators do we have? And it's not always, but that's your preferred style, right? Okay. And I know you're thinking about your spouse, predominantly a female-dominated space here.
Or boss.
So I'm being very, or your boss. I know what you're thinking. So I'm being nice. Conflict management strategies, compromise, right? Compromise. Agreeing to give up part of the goal and part of the relationship. I know this is going to tick you off for a little while, but this goal's really, really, really important to the organization, to me personally. I know it's going to tick you off a little bit for a while. I think I can repair the relationship at a later time, and we can both still achieve the goal, right? That's what a compromiser often does. You know, and I'll think politically here, I'll talk politically, somehow we have gotten to the point in the United States of America where compromise is a filthy word. You've got to be pure. You've got to be purely liberal or purely conservative. And these are the things we do. Here are our talking points on each side. People, we've got Democrats and Republicans in the room, but I think we're all Americans. Last I checked, and I'm not proselytizing, but I'm telling you, compromise is not a dirty word. It's okay to compromise to get things done. At some point, you might give just a little, realizing that a relationship may be impacted or that the goal may be not perfectly what you wanted it to be in terms of being met, but we compromise to move the trains forward, okay? All right, that's all political. I won't do anymore. Then there's the compete. Oh, how many of you think you're compromisers? Let me see. 1, 2, see, Republicans and Democrats, baby. Not many compromisers in here. I'm going with the party. How many independents I'm going? All right, competers.
Independence compromise.
Well, there you go. They do compromise. Competers. The competitor. This is the person that says, relationships be damned, I win. I'm going to run faster.
Kill the will to be.
This is the person who goes out and you're just for a nice run, and then they get a little faster, and then a little faster, and all of a sudden it's a race. Okay, come on, I'll beat you. Competitors. I love competitors. Makes our country go round, right? If America didn't have a competitive spirit, we wouldn't be the country we are today. And I agree with that, but the question is, in terms of conflict, what does the competitor look at? Goals at all costs. I just want to win. I know my position, I know what I want, and I want to win. Now, that's okay if there are time restrictions. So, for instance, I always used to use this example in schools. I don't have time to reach consensus when there's a fire in the corner. You may or may not want me to pull the fire alarm. Tough. I win. I pull it every time. All right? Kind of makes me competitive, kind of makes me not want to accommodate. Sometimes you just got to say, there's a time restriction here. I don't have time to talk about this. We've got to move this thing forward, right? And leaders do that all the time, every day. And peers do that as well. The crisis situation often leads to an unpopular decision. And any action that's vital to an organization's welfare has to be taken, and sometimes you just got to compete. You got to be a competitor, right? How many competitors out there? Win at all costs.
I'd like to see those hands higher. Because those competitors are really keeping them low.
I have one competitor.
There were a couple other.
Don't think one is bad, and it's not always that you use competitiveness, but you're not afraid to if necessary,
You
right?
want to win, and you want to win. That's okay.
Okay. All right, last but not least, this is the fifth way that we handle conflict, and that is the collaborator. This is the person, it takes a lot of energy and commitment, takes excellent communication skills, and this is the person who doesn't really care that much about the goal, who doesn't really care that much about the relationship. They just don't want conflict. They want to negotiate and arrive at a mutually agreeable solution. That's their thing. It's process, right? It's that third-party objective person who comes into a situation that's conflicted. Those are the collaborators. And hopefully that collaborator helps you in your organization collaborate with each other as well. This is suitable when there aren't any time constraints, when the solution satisfies everybody's objective, and it's important to you that the solution is not one-sided, right? And it's important when conflicting parties are responsible for implementing the solution. I used to do this a lot at Jeffersonville High School. Now, Jeff High is a school of about 2,500 students, very diverse, probably 70-30 in terms of minority. Still majority white, but 30% minority. 2,500 kids, and we started a peer judicial system, okay? And the first thing we did was, you guys work it out. If you two had a fight, maybe not a fist fight, but some kind of conflict, first thing we're going to do is train a peer, one of our seniors, to help you, and this is where conflict coaching came to me, if you want to know the truth, these 30 years ago at Jeff High. Because the easiest thing to do was for me to go, 3 days, 3 days. Mrs. Snelling's been at it again. I'm suspending him for 3. Because I had a really nice handbook, and it told me what to do as assistant principal, and I could have done that, okay? I said, let's see if we can figure this out. Let's see what the recommendation from a peer would be if there had been conflict, and let's see if these two, because here, what happened after he did his 3 days and she did her 3 days, and they came back to Jeff High?
Back at it.
Every time. Every time. If there's no counseling, if there are no, if there's no discussion, if you just get a spanking, the behavior will continue. Okay? Often human behavior, you can't beat it out of them.
And then they're in my office for 8 weeks because of a zero tolerance for violence in the school.
That's correct. That's correct. So that's what collaborating is. And I think this will give you a pretty good idea of who and what you are. Okay? So there's your X and Y axis. On the vertical axis, we have goal. On the horizontal axis, we have the importance of maintaining relationships. And they put compromise in the middle. And again, I want you to understand, not everybody uses all 5 of these all the time, but you do have a preferred style. And those of you who are honest with us, kind of raise the hand, and you can read this again on your own. All right, Cheryl. There you go.
Okay, now, back to your list. Who would be willing to throw out some of the topics? Like, what kind of stressors, what kind of conflicts did you put on your list? Don't name names, just topics. Anyone? Food? What food to prepare, where to go eat? That. Okay. Someone. Appeals. Appeals for the taxpayers, okay? Anything else? Others? 3. I think there's some connection with that in the group. Other stressors, other conflicts that you deal with. Coworkers? Other department heads? The new gap report. Now, I don't know some of the lingo, but I've actually worked for state and federal and county government. So some of the lingo you're familiar with, but so who identifies with the GAP report? Okay, there are others in the room who know. Other people, anybody have other groups of people or individual people on your list? No names. I'm sorry? Parenting. Parenting's one of them. Retirement, making decisions. Others. Elder care. There's a sandwich generation. How many of you are caring for your children, and they may be 30 because kids keep coming back home, and also caring for or being a representative for elders, for parents. We're stuck in the middle. So I'm hearing a lot of times the stressor is family. It's coworkers. Nobody said boss. You said coworker, but boss. Who has conflict? Is there anybody in the room that's ever had a conflict with a boss? Anyone? Oh, this gentleman's a sweetheart. He's never had conflict with a boss. I had a boss one time who was a very active alcoholic. We never knew who was coming to work. So we became really good at trying to avoid conflict with that person. And we used all of these styles. So now what I want to do is, and there's I want to mention to you that our behaviors, how we behave and how we manage that conflict is really important in how we end our day, each day. And what happens if we take home conflict from work? What happens at home? More conflict at home. So I want to suggest to you, here's a handout. I'm just going to pass a group of these if you'll just pass them along. These are about, and this is a bonus for you. This is not in the slideshow, but this is some behavior styles, and there are 3 different choices that we often make. If you'll just pass those around, please. They are assertive, aggressive, or passive. Now, they correlate with the other list of styles that we talked about. How many of you feel like you are very passive when you're faced with conflict or faced with stress? You don't want to do anything about it. You're very passive. Now, does that mean that everything's okay? No, absolutely not. A lot of times the passive person feels like they're being walked on, and you build great resentment, great frustration, and then what happens? What happens when you get to that point where you've been passive for quite a period of time? Does anybody ever blow? You took it 12 times. You were passive 13, you're ready to choke the bully, right? You may not do it. So another style is aggressive. I consider the passive style of behavior. In fact, everybody look up right now. Look up. Look at the ceiling. Can anybody tell me what color this carpet is? Can anyone in the room tell me what color this carpet is? Most of you are going, I don't have a clue, because you haven't noticed. A lot of times the passive behavior, the person who's remaining passive, feels like a rug. They feel like they're being walked on. So then we look at the aggressive behavior style. Bulldozer. How many of you have ever worked with a bulldozer or lived with a bulldozer? Now, that doesn't mean that the passive person is bad. A lot of times that person who can be quiet and a good listener and really gets the work done is an asset to a group. A bulldozer is an asset too. It pushes things out of the way to get things accomplished.
Cheryl, those of us who are bulldozers prefer the term earth mover.
Okay. Moving the earth no matter what's in the way. So how many people feel like you have ever been pushed by a bulldozer? How's it feel? You feel like you're being pushed around. And then more, again, like the person who's passive. Anger, resentment, and what do? With a bulldozer, sometimes you can't communicate, or they are not willing to, but they do get things done. They're very effective in doing things. So our goal, hopefully, is to learn an assertive behavior style. And that means we are trying to communicate, trying to work through something in a way that respects both our needs, our rights, our feelings, as well as that other person. Are we willing to have a to talk about it? Can we turn the bulldozer off for a few minutes? Can we pick the rug up and dust it off a little bit so that nobody feels like they're superior or inferior? And that's a lot of times what, a bulldozer a lot of times does feel like they are superior. On the other hand, sometimes they feel like they're not good enough and they have to be louder than everyone else to get their point across. And a lot of times the passive person actually is very effective, but they maybe haven't learned how to communicate what their needs are. So the assertive style is a goal that we would like to use. Now look at your list of stressors. And as you look at that, for yourself, look at, and none of these are all bad or all good, like everything else. Sometimes we need to be passive. When I get stopped for driving 90 and the speed limit's 60, I probably need to remain very passive. I haven't done that for a long time, by the way. And sometimes we do need to be aggressive. If someone's coming at us and we're in danger, we need to get the heck out of there as aggressively as we possibly can, right? So any of these can be effective. But the assertive, in a workplace and in relationships, the assertive behavior is the one that generally gives us the best result for everyone involved. So now look at your list of stressors and make a little note out beside that of each of those. Which of these styles do you tend to practice with that particular stressor? And if you're tending to practice the passive or the aggressive, it might be time to look at, is it possible to try to work on some of the assertive behavior? And we'll talk about, we have some more skills that we're going to get to about that later as well. So keep your list handy. Charlie.
So as you're doing that, when you're done, I just passed out a conflict exercise. Do not freak out about the nature of the conflict. It is to some, it is very emotional. So what I want you to do is read that short scenario, and at the bottom, this is individually. You're doing this individually. After you're done doing what Cheryl asked in terms of passive, assertive, or active, right? Read that, and then you rate who you think is most to least responsible. Most to least responsible for what happened at the end of the scenario. It's going to take you 5, maybe 6, 7 minutes, so take your time. Once again, I realize this is a rough story. It is designed as a conflict exercise. There's a lot going on here. I get it. Individually, rank who is most to least responsible, and every person must have a ranking individually, please. See, a lot of you have done your numbers. How many of you need more time individually for this exercise? All right, just a few. Take a minute. So here's what I'd like you to do. And Cheryl and I are going to be wandering around. Now, my friends, get in groups at your table and come to consensus on who the group believes is most to least responsible. So you 3 maybe could hook up. We've got a single here. You 4 or 5 could hook up a little bit. You got to explain your case. And as a group, you come up with who is most to least responsible. You can divide your groups up. Those 4, you 3 can get together. If you guys want to turn around, it's up to you. And yeah, I'd like you to work with others from other counties if you can. You have 1 minute. 1 minute, and I need a group to say Who was most responsible? Who was least responsible? The whole group should agree. 1 minute. Now, in the last 10 seconds, do me a favor. Last 10 seconds, your group's pretty close. And look, it doesn't matter if you agree perfectly. I want you to look up here at the PowerPoint and tell me, not in your, just in your own mind, in this exercise, in this conflict, and this isn't easy. I'm telling you, I've had Purdue students come to fisticuffs. I had a fight in my classroom, right? Was it the nurse? Was it Jerry? No, it's Jerry. No, it's the nurse. And the next thing I know, I got to separate people, okay? This is not an easy exercise. It's designed to be a conflict producer, right? How did you handle this in this situation? Were you a competitor? Were you a collaborator? Were you a compromiser? Were you an avoider? Or were you an accommodator, right? Accommodations. And you know what? I don't care who your number one was. I know I went around and asked my groups, who's your one, who's your two? Doesn't matter. I'm looking for behavior here. Cheryl, tell me what you saw.
I see that some people actually identify with one of these or the other. I see some people that are very kind of laying back, being really quiet, trying to avoid it a little bit. How many really wanted to avoid this exercise? Well, yeah, there's some definite ones. I see others that are kind of tense, and they're really certain about how they feel, and they want to convince the other people, but they're people that aren't going to budge, right? So, would anybody want to share what you identified with?
Well, let me do one thing over here on this side. So here's what I observed on this. Cheryl took that side, I took this side. I had a two-top over here. I had two people. And I asked you, get in groups of 4 or 5. These two stayed down in 30 seconds. We agree, everything's good. We got 1 through 6. It was like a quick game thing or something. I go, there is no right or wrong answer. You mean you agree on everything? They go, yep, we agree. Personal responsibility. She took the drug. She chose to have sex. She got pregnant. She took the drug. It's on her. And then they had the other 5, and it was quick. Why do you think 2 people can agree more than this group, which was 130 of them? You got the whole... They got the whole table. Then these people turn around and start yelling. What do you got? You know, and then one person kind of. So why is it easier for 2 people than 9 people? Yes. Less people, less opinion, and maybe less competition. Maybe, right? So the goal here, or the thought is, leaders, keep your team small. You do not need to go out and get the entire county involved, right? All right. I saw, Cheryl, I saw one right here. I won't point to who it was. I get over here and I go, who's your one? And they go, it's the girl. Or I don't even remember who the one was, but it's the girl. And they all said it, but one person in the group. And she sat quietly and smiled. Said they're full of manure. In her eyes. Now, not to me. That wasn't true. And so we've got a little bit of a compromiser and maybe even a little bit of avoidance and some accommodation. So you can see this axis that we see here, you kind of fall within. You're not one or the other, right? Cheryl, any other observations?
There was a group back here where it seemed like everybody was in agreement except one. How did it work out? Stuck to your ground. So you didn't let them persuade you. So what that says is sometimes we stand alone. How's it feel? It's okay. And I actually saw some of that nonverbal language too. The eyes, like I'm going along with them, but I'm not so sure. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Now we're going to look at in situations of conflict and stress that we may have 4 basic choices. And I say in every situation we may have 4 basic choices. Now there's always somebody in a group that says, somebody held a gun to my head and I didn't have any of these choices. Yes, you did. You did. I'm not saying they're easy, but some of our choices, and you may want to make some notes on these, because these are things that can apply in your workplace, in your personal lives, dealing with that grouchy Kroger, clerk that's really giving it to you because somebody gave it to them earlier. But those 4 choices are: 1, accept it. Now, acceptance means it's okay. I don't have a problem with it. It's not going to eat at me. It's not going to come back. I accept it. We're good. It's all good. That's really hard. There's certain situations we're not going to accept. What are some that you can't accept? Think about that. What would be situation, or conflict or stress situations that you can't accept? I'm not going to accept somebody being violent with me. Not acceptable. So that's an extreme. Now, next one is to negotiate for change. That means we go back to communication skills. Now, when we negotiate for change, that means we're going to have some type of dialogue. Some people are not willing. But the thing is, we as individuals can make the effort. Can we talk about this? Can we discuss what our choices might be? Can we look at compromise? Now, negotiating for change does not mean we're going to get what we want or what we need. What it means is I might be able to walk away from that situation saying, I did the best I could. Now, what are my other choices? I'm not getting what I need. I'm not getting my things taken care of. Or maybe I'm not getting the resources, or I'm not getting the new staff member that I need. So what are some other choices that I have? The next one is change my expectations. I'm working in a very small county that has few resources, and they say I can't get any more help. Now, how am I going to handle this? If I'm going to be in this position, I may need to figure out what my change of expectations for myself. I can't, if I remain angry, frustrated, or upset because the county doesn't have the resources that I need, what are my choices? Do I work harder? Do I work longer hours? Do I, recruit interns from the local college? What are other choices? And then a fourth one is, and this comes in varying degrees, leave the situation. When there's great conflict in the moment, we may need to take a time out. How many have taken a time out in the bathroom because things were so tense, you felt like you maybe didn't have a right to say to whoever you're having the conflict with, like the bulldozer boss, I need to take a break and think about this. You can't do that. But who can refuse you going to the restroom? I used to go, one workplace, I would go in the restroom and I would sit there with my head on my hands on my lap, just trying to think about how do I go back in there and battle this situation that's really seemed like it was a losing battle. So sometimes leaving the situation is taking a break. You may need to take a day off. If things are really heated with conflict and you're so stressed you cannot function as a professional, which you all are chosen to function as, you may need to take a day off. Take a mental health day, take a sick day, whatever. You may need to do that. When's the last time you had a vacation? Am I so stressed about everything that I'm not functioning well? Question?
Sometimes the choice would be just to wait it out, because if it's a primary situation or a election situation, and I've been elected official for a long time now, and I tell people that some things happen by osmosis and you cannot affect that change. You can't affect that change, right? However, the outcome may be what you desire if you can sit back and wait a little bit and see what happens. So most organizations, I would say that this would be true. But I would think that we would have a special organization in our counties where possibly waiting it out, especially during election years. So I just want to mention that because.
And I agree with that. Part of the waiting it out is taking a break, taking a time out. Like, okay, I know I need to sit on this. I had a personal conflict situation in the last month or so, and I just sat on it. I didn't know how to handle it, didn't know what to do with it, but I have this reputation of backing off so that I choose not, in many cases, not to react when I'm most emotional. And that's something to be aware of when you're looking at these choices.
Did that evolve into a solution?
Yeah, there's a solution to it. It may not have been the one that I wished for, but it's the one that was necessary as an end result. Sometimes we need to sit and observe. I'm part Indian, part Native American, and my grandmother said, listen to the whispers so you don't have to hear the screams. And sometimes you just need to sit and listen. Sometimes we need to take a break from, especially, I say, in order to manage our emotions when we're feeling most stressed or most conflict, sometimes we need to just sit. Take a break from it, and then we can get back to it. So another area of leaving the situation, then ultimately we may need to leave the situation completely. We may need to leave the job. We may need to leave the relationship. But there are varying degrees of all these things. So
And if I may, Cheryl, sometimes you choose to leave the situation. Sometimes voters choose that you'll leave the situation. So I do understand what you're sharing here. November's a big day for a lot of people in this room. And sometimes you don't have a choice. You are asked to leave by your boss or whoever it may be, or the voters, or you make the choice to leave, right?
Absolutely. So can you see where these four choices, even bottom line is, if one isn't working for you, two doesn't work for you, three isn't working for you, sometimes we do need to leave. And that's sometimes unfortunate. Sometimes you have to end things. But there are varying degrees of that. Try other things first. One of the things that we say about emotion is just because you have a feeling does not mean you have to act on it in that moment. Take a break from it sometimes and figure it out before you react. How many of you have regretted an emotional reaction? Most of us, right? And do you wish maybe you sat on it for a minute or a week or whatever? That's that. Now, next tool. This is a skill that can be used when we're talking about when emotion is escalating. And when you know that you're not going to be functioning well. So one of the things that's recommended, I call this the STOP method, and you can use this as an acronym. This also works in personal situations too. S stands for, and we left that so you can make notes. S. Think about when you're driving and you see there's a stop sign up there. What do you need to do when you're getting close to that stop sign? Slow down. And you stop. Ultimately, hopefully, you stop. What happens if you don't slow down and you don't stop? You're going to be in danger. You're going to put other people in danger. You may wreck your car. You may kill somebody. Sometimes when there's a lot, especially on a busy intersection, and that's when we're talking about emotion has escalated. Maybe it's just within us as an individual. The other person may not seem emotional, but I know when I feel it, I need to slow down. What a lot of times people speed up then, and then there's even more danger, right? So slow down and stop. T is take time to think. And don't let those bulldozers who are insisting that you have to give them an answer in that moment push you forward when you know you're not ready. It's okay to take time to think. That's part of being an assertive individual, to ask for time. Now, somebody might not like that, but if you know you're not going to function fully, if you speed up when you know you need to slow down, go to the bathroom. Really, go to the bathroom. I painted that bathroom. I hung things up. It was a long time ago, and I was very young and immature, and I was new in business, and I didn't know what else to do, but I knew I needed to just stop. So the T is take time to think. O, organize your thoughts. Organize things. And what are your options? Organize your options. What choices do I have in this situation? And then P, plan your action. Now, if you practice this a lot, you begin to get, so it becomes automatic. It's, again, back to driving. You remember the first time you got behind the wheel of a car? Did it feel natural? Did you know what the heck you were doing? No, it was scary for most people. Now, some of us grew up on farms, so we'd been driving a long time, and we thought we knew what we were doing, but wasn't it quite different on the road with stop signs than it was in the field on the farm? So even that was a transition. So then plan your action before you do anything. Plan. And especially the more conflict you feel, the more stress you feel, the more you need to use these tools. You can use these tools anywhere. So think about that. Keep that list of 4 choices somewhere where you can refer to it. And that when you're feeling the most emotion, the most conflict, the most stress, look at it, review it. Take time, stop, and even look at that list and see what you can do with it.